All he wished to do was open an account, a routine procedure anyone could perform. Yet, instead of being greeted warmly, he was treated as a criminal. A mere glance from the manager transformed an everyday day into a night of anger and shame. What transpired within that lobby was not only an insult, it was an action that exposed the ugly reality of power, prejudice, and secret lives. Because the man they attempted to belittle was one that they never should have underestimated. What happened next would leave everyone in shock. Marcus Johnson was no stranger to hard labor. Raised and born in a humble neighborhood, he bore the burden of his family's expectations on his shoulders. Decades of late nights, long meetings, and compromises had finally been rewarded. He had created a company from scratch, making it one of the most well-known firms in town. Marcus was a success to the world. He was a leader who elicited loyalty among his employees. But on this morning, he wasn't entering a boardroom or delivering a speech at a convention. He was merely going into a bank. Nattily dressed, briefcase under his arm, Marcus anticipated nothing more than a normal visit. He needed to open a new account for his company, something he had done hundreds of times in the past. But under the shiny floors and fluorescent lights of that bank, something sinister was lurking. A place where appearance tended to be worth, and color could scream louder than success. Marcus didn't know it yet, but as soon as he handed over his ID, the mood would change. This wasn't just going to be another errand. It would become a test, a brutal reminder that no matter how high he had climbed, prejudice could still try to pull him down.
Marcus strode confidently to the counter, his shining shoes clicking against the marble floor. It was something he had done dozens of times before in banks around the nation. But today, something was off. The manager's eyes locked onto him with an expression that wasn't curiosity. It was suspicion. The instant Marcus handed over his papers, air seemed to thicken. The manager hardly looked at the papers before his tone changed, hard and curt. He questioned the validity of Marcus's ID, his voice raised just enough for surrounding customers to turn around. Others in line began to whisper. Some glared. Others looked like they didn't see him, though their eyes betrayed them. Marcus remained calm. He told the manager who he was, why he was there, and even pulled out further evidence of his business. But the manager didn't care to listen. Rather, he leaned over the counter, his voice laced with contempt. Marcus was accused of attempting fraud by him. He ordered security to be called. A silence dropped over the lobby as two guards walked toward him. Their hands hovered on their belts, their gazes fixed on Marcus as if he were guilty already. The humiliation cut deeper with each passing second. He wasn't being questioned. This was his display, his treatment as if his presence was a danger. Marcus could feel the warmth of half a dozen eyes searing into him. He had encountered adversity before, but none so brazenly humiliating. Each word spat from the manager was laced with venom, each movement calculated to demote him. And then, in a move that stunned even the onlookers, the manager's hand cracked his arm with a harsh slap, and the papers slipped from his hand. Papers littered the floor like fallen leaves. Gasps filled the room. Some customers stepped back, others pulled out their phones, yet no one intervened. The bank had become a stage, and Marcus was being forced to play a role he had spent his life rising above. The target of hatred and judgment. For a fleeting moment, Marcus wanted to walk away. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone in here. But as the security guards advanced, he realized this wasn't about him. It was about every human being who had ever been made to feel less than. Every human who had ever been judged on skin first, not character. The tension escalated to a breaking point. The guards went for his arm. The manager sneered, confident in his control. And at that instant, Marcus made a decision that would alter the room forever. He stood up straight, stared the manager straight in the eye, and set himself to share a truth so profound it would shatter every assumption in the room. The room was quiet, but the quiet was oppressive. Marcus stood upright, the searing agony of the manager's slap still smarting on his arm. The guards had moved in, prepared to lead him out, as if he were a felon. The manager's sneer grew bigger, believing he had taken away Marcus's power. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. Slowly, deliberately, he picked up his scattered papers from the floor. He put them back into his briefcase with steady hands. Then he took out one more folder, thicker, heavier, embossed with the company logo. With a quietness that pierced through tension, he set it on the counter. The manager laughed. "What is this supposed to prove?" Marcus gazed at him straight in the eye. His tone was low, even, but it had sufficient force to shut down every hint of whisper in the room. "It shows," he said, "that the man whom you just accused, embarrassed, and slapped is the CEO of the company which owns this building." The words hit like thunder. A shiver moved through the lobby. Gasps, whispers, the ring of incredulity. The guards stood stock still, their hold relaxing. Patrons strained their necks to catch sight of the documents, the signatures, the irrefutable reality before them. The manager's assurance was breached. His smirk gave way to a flush of alarm. The fist that had struck Marcus now shook at his side. His authority disappeared in a moment. To Marcus, the sting of the slap was insignificant in contrast to the burden of that instant. The sheer, unarguable nakedness of prejudice exposed before all the world. He had not used a raised voice. He had not responded with violence. He had merely spoken the truth, and that truth was more destructive than any blow. And as they stood there in awed silence, one thing was left hanging in the air. How could someone with so much power be treated as though he was nothing? The manager's face went white as Marcus's words registered. The guards retreated, suddenly uncertain of their position. Customers who once gazed silently now murmured in shock, their gaze darting between the embarrassed manager and the man he had attempted to destroy. Marcus did not yell. He did not ask for apologies. He just stood before them, upright and unfazed, a living opposite of all the stereotypes hurled at him. In that instant, his very being was sufficient to destroy the false impression the manager attempted to create. Finally, the silence was broken. The manager grumbled an apology, his voice shaking, but too late. The truth had been released into the room. Marcus packed up his things and exited, his dignity still in check, leaving the entire lobby to deal with what they had just seen. But the tale doesn't end there, at those glass doors, because what went down in that bank was not all about Marcus. It was about a system that still judges, humiliates, and takes away people's respect based on nothing more than color. His title protected him that day. But what about the many others who don't possess a title to protect them? What about those whose reality is ignored, whose dignity is never regained? Marcus's tale compels us to confront a question we cannot escape. How much longer will prejudice attempt to determine value before we can acknowledge at last that human worth is not acquired through power, position, or riches, but through the mere fact of being human? The next time you see injustice, will you remain silent? Will you speak out so that tales such as this do not have to be told?